Hey everyone, welcome back to our second edition of the Fink and Friends show for this 2023-2024 school year. I'm Mr. Finkbeiner, and this morning I am joined by special guests Mrs. Brown and Mrs. Muma. We are in Mrs. Muma's office. She has these awesome college and university pennants in the background, and she's our school counselor. You probably know Mrs. Muma, but maybe some of you are new to the Shocker community. Mrs. Muma has been our school counselor for several years now.
Yes, I think I'm in year 10.
Okay.
11.
Wow, year 10 or 11. And I've got to remember to use this microphone for us. And then Mrs. Brown is new to our district this year. She is our superintendent and our elementary principal.
Yes.
So we are really glad to have Mrs. Brown here. And Let's start by interviewing Mrs. Brown a little bit, since you're the big cheese. That's what I told Jaden and Max.
Oh, no.
Yeah, you're the big cheese, the superintendent. Mrs. Brown, just tell us a little bit about where you've been the last several years and kind of what led you back to coming to Waterville.
Okay. All right. I started my education and started teaching at Waterville, believe it or not. 20-some years ago, I taught 1 year here at Waterville, down in the basement. That was fun. But then I went and got a job in Wenatchee, taught there for many, many years, 8th grade at Foothills Middle School, and then I went over to East Wenatchee, Eastmont School District, and was a principal there for a few years. I love Waterville. This is where all three of my daughters grew up, where all three of my daughters graduated and participated in sports and Envirothon and all the important things that help kids grow up and become successful. So I believe in what Waterville does, and that is loving kids and helping them find their place in the world.
Awesome. That's great. Thank you, Mrs. Brown. Mm-hmm. Jaden had a great question for you. Being the superintendent and coming into Waterville again now, what would be, some of your future goals for Waterville School District? It could be maybe something that you're looking to do this year, or maybe something, over the course of a few or several years.
I believe that we have to be really, really clear on what's important to us, and I think what's important is teaching kids, and really more important than what we teach is what kids learn. So helping children find success, and this is a big part of what Miss Muma does, is helping every child find their own path. Not everybody is going to learn the same things in the same way, and I want to make sure that what we do here at Waterville meets the needs of every single individual student.
Great. Thank you, Mrs. Brown. So there's a little bit about Mrs. Brown. She mentioned that she actually taught here at one time, and then all of her three girls graduated from Waterville. In fact, they played volleyball for Mrs. Muma, right? Is that right, Mrs. Muma? Now, we have one big upcoming event that I want all of you Shocker community and Shocker fans to know about. Our first home volleyball game is tomorrow, Thursday, and volleyball is big in this family. Now, you may not know it, but Mrs. Brown and Mrs. Muma are sisters, and we're gonna play a little game here in a second to see which sister knows which sister best. But yeah, I was saying Mrs. Brown's daughters played volleyball for Mrs. Muma, and Mrs. Muma's daughter now, Alyssa, she is our head volleyball coach, Mrs. Polson. And then Mrs. Muma is helping out with volleyball this year as well. So we have the volleyball community just right here. But come and check out our volleyball teams tomorrow night. Home game, 5 o'clock, 6:30 varsity. 5 o'clock JV, 6:30 varsity in the Waterville gym. Okay, let's see. Mrs. Muma, we do have you on the show, and so we are going to play that game, and I didn't want to put you on the spot, but I was thinking, as Mrs. Brown was talking, if there's anything from the counselor side of Waterville School that you would like to project to the community just be thinking about that. We'll go ahead and play the game. Or if you have something, is there anything fresh in your mind that you'd like to tell the Waterville community from your job perspective?
Well, I think I can just add that I totally agree with Mrs. Brown as far as our goal and our purpose here at Waterville. The things that I have always loved about Waterville is that we can really seek out kids in need and help them and meet them where they're at. Because we're a smaller district, we have some just unique ways of helping kids through our community and schools liaison and through counseling. And we have some mental health counseling that we offer kids through Zoom now, and some things that are really like special. So just want to say that we do really want to meet the needs of kids and where they're at.
Great. Okay. All right. Well, let's get right into this. Sisters. Who knows which sister best? And so we're just gonna play a little favorite game. So what we've done is Jaden and Max have done a little legwork here, and they've talked to Mrs. Brown and Mrs. Muma ahead of time. And we'll just start with something easy. Now, Mrs. Muma admittedly said that this was not an easy one, but we have to put this one in here. So, Mrs. Brown, what do you think Mrs. Muma's favorite color is?
I'm going with burgundy.
Burgundy. That's going to be
Oh, shoot.
that's an incorrect. Mrs. Muma, what do you think Mrs. Brown's favorite color is?
I will go with, let's say red.
Red. That is as well. So it was black for Mrs. Brown.
Should have asked each other before.
It was black for Mrs. Brown, and it was purple for Mrs. Muma. So it is 0-0. And are you guys comfortable with keeping score? I just want to know.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, definitely.
We're very competitive.
Bring it.
Okay, here we go. All right. Let's go to something a little bit easier. This is going to be easy, I think. Mrs. Muma, what is Mrs. Brown's favorite sport?
Volleyball.
What about for Mrs. Muma?
Volleyball.
Okay. Ding, 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 ding. Yes, we got it. And Max and Jaden, we're going to work on some sound effects, right? Okay.
Oh.
Yeah, that'll be great. Favorite hobby. What about for Mrs. Muma? Favorite hobby?
I'm going with riding horses.
Yes! Do the applause. Woohoo! So, and then what about for Mrs. Brown?
I would say spending time with her grandchildren.
Ooh, that is a great hobby, but her favorite hobby is woodworking.
Oh, but that's in the past.
See, now she's going to say, yeah, actually, she came up with a better one.
She came up with a better one. We'll think about bonus point for Mrs. Muma. We'll think about a bonus point for Mrs. Muma. And you know what? We don't have to. What do you guys think, Max and Jaden? Give me a thumb up if you think Mrs. Muma gets a bonus point. Yes.
Oh,
okay.
they're generous.
So we're tied at 2.
Okay.
We're tied at 2.
Okay.
All right, tied at 2. Favorite animal? What about for Mrs. Muma?
Oh, Mrs. Muma is crazy about horses.
Crazy about horses. What about for Mrs. Brown?
I would say, let's say, no animals.
No animals. Mrs. Brown said horses.
Really?
Yeah.
If I have to pick an animal, I'll pick horses.
Okay. Well, Mrs. Brown's up 3-2. This is important, Mrs. Muma. Don't miss this one.
Okay.
Mrs. Brown's favorite food.
Favorite food? I would say I'll go with Mexican.
Okay. It's actually it's tiki masaka.
Tikka masala.
It's tikka masala. Tikka masala.
It's Indian.
It's Indian.
Oh, gosh, I did not know that.
Indian
about her.
cuisine.
Yeah.
What about for
She's
Mrs.
making
Muma?
these things up.
Oh, Mrs. Muma's favorite
What
food,
does she really like to eat?
chicken cashew salad.
Sounds like a great salad, but no, the correct answer is Mexican food. Mexican
Okay,
food.
darn.
Okay, so it's Mrs. Brown 3, Mrs. Muma 2, but we still have one more.
Okay.
Mrs. Muma, you still have a chance to tie, and our tiebreaker is going to be really fun. Okay, how about Mrs. Brown's favorite place?
Disneyland.
Ding, 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 ding. Okay, now,
Was she listening?
I just know that.
It
Mrs.
is.
Brown, this is for the win. Mrs. Muma's favorite place.
The ranch.
It's close. It's very close. I would say you would have to give it to her.
Have
'cause
to give it to her?
Omak Creek is on the ranch.
Oh, Matt Creek is on the. Well, ding, 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 ding. Mrs. Brown, you are the sister winner.
We do not have to do a thumb.
We do not have to do a thumb war for the tie break. Mrs. Brown, congratulations. It's good to let
Yeah, your older sister win.
older sister win.
Yeah.
It keeps things better
Keeps
in the
the
family.
peace.
All
Yes.
right. Okay. Well, hey, thanks, Shocker community, Shocker Nation. That's it for our second Fink and Friends. We'll be back with more Fink and Friends later this week or early next week.